savor the spectacular views of two private rooftop gardens perched high above New York City. And marvel at the daring art and architecture of Sweden's famous MILLESGÅRDEN. Join us now for an inviting World Garden Tour. One of the most enchanting places in Barcelona, Spain, is the romantic garden of El LABYRINTH City Park. The park, named for its large topiary maze, was once a private garden on the estate of Antony Duval and the Duval family. The romantic garden was added to the estate in 1853 and opened to the public with the rest of the park in 1971. It offers a lush contrast to the arid climate of Barcelona. Water is abundant and splashes over stone to create a cool, moist microclimate. Here, a bubbling spring cascades down the hillside into an ancient gully lined with cooling shade trees, collecting in a series of pools along the way. The refreshing atmosphere provides visitors an opportunity for relief and introspection, and allows vegetation not normally found in the Mediterranean climate to flourish. Among these plants is the papyrus, which needs abundant water to spread its underwater root stems. The warm, shallow ponds of the romantic garden provide the perfect environment for the plant. Individual papyrus stalks can reach impressive heights of 10 to 13 feet and add a dashing touch to the garden. Along with the papyrus, water lilies also spread their roots and find a home in the pools of the romantic garden. A dry stone wall, a quiet dark pool, and bright green beds of lush ferns give the garden the romantic look of an overgrown ruin.
En cuanto a la vegetación, podríamos decir que no es un jardín.
There are not a lot of flowers in the park. Mediterranean gardens have a very special design to use many perennial plants and trees so they stay green all year long. There are many trees and the presence of flowers is very restricted.
It would hardly be a romantic garden without at least a few flowers, like these bear's breeches. However, by concentrating on large expanses of green space, the garden is able to retain its special character year-round, and with as little maintenance as possible. This design, which was new in the mid-1800s, became so popular it continues to be emulated today.
Paseándote por él, estás en distintas situaciones, en poco espacio de tiempo.
You have places where water, sunshine, and light mix together to create beautiful images. The different spaces were designed separately to give you the feeling that the gardens are much larger than they actually are in size.
El recorte perfecto.
Visitors move between these smaller spaces on rough-hewn stone pathways set amidst the Mediterranean landscape.
Para el aspecto de la vegetación se procuró mantener al máximo lo que era.
We tried to keep as many of the original plants and trees that had been part of the garden for over 200 years as possible. We put in a minimum of new species of plants because we wanted to retain the original historic flavor of the garden from when it was created in 1792.
Swans are kept in one of the ponds to add an air of grace and elegance, in keeping with the Duval's romantic vision of the garden.
The romantic garden was created by his family in 1853. The garden tells the story of man's struggle with life, that there is work and at the end there is always death awaiting him. There is a false cemetery to illustrate this point. So there is a message in this garden.
Near the end of the walk is a sunken corner where a false cemetery once offered visitors a reminder of how life is delicate. Ironically, the cemetery itself has vanished over time. The only thing that remains is the small hermit's hut, now thickly overgrown. The romantic garden of the Labyrinth pleases the senses and allows visitors a cool escape for a few moments. But it also presents each visitor the subtle reminder of its 19th century romantic worldview, which they can take with them when they leave.
What makes this garden important is transmitting the feeling of the neoclassical as well as the romantic way of looking at the world. I think visitors see this as very sensitive.
When World Garden Tour continues, we'll soar to stunning rooftop gardens in New York, and later visit a royal Swedish sculpture garden. Our World Garden Tour now hustles you off to Manhattan, a maze of steel and concrete that hardly seems like a suitable environment for a garden. However, New Yorkers plant in every space they can, including their high-rise rooftops and terraces. A delightful example of one of these rooftop gardens can be found 18 floors above Park Avenue in the 3-story penthouse of interior designer Frederik Biggs.
At the end of a busy day, coming up to any one of these terraces is just extra special. I feel very fortunate to have this. I can't imagine ever living without a terrace again. Then the other night I was actually sitting at my desk working late till it was 9 o'clock, and I thought I just cannot decorate for one more minute. And I got up and went out with my pruning shears and just deadheaded everything on the second floor terrace and felt great and went back to my desk 30 minutes later, you know, so it does that for your spirits.
The 9-terrace rooftop garden was created for Frederik by garden designer John CARLOFITS. He took special care to create a space that would match Frederik's moods and tastes.
When designing a garden, I try to work with my client's personality and really bring them into the garden and make it a part of their own, instead of designing the same garden over and over again that I would design for myself.
I think that this is one of my philosophies in decorating, in that I don't want every threshold of a house to be a new surprise. But I think a room should flow. I think a house should have a flow. And I think the same thing with going out into a garden. I don't want to come from a pink and green room to a purple and yellow garden.
John's exteriors are color coordinated with Frederik's interior designs. Blue furniture outside on the terrace leads from Frederik's blue-toned office. John continued the blue theme with lobelia, an annual that likes cool weather and are well situated for planting in small spaces. Outside Frederik's pink bedroom, John accented with pink flowers, including soft pink roses and hot pink loosestrife. This pink terrace, one of Frederik's largest, is where she does much of her entertaining. And because so many guests see this terrace, it was necessary to disguise some of the rooftop's less attractive features.
We have an elevator shaft here I've had to work with, and you're trying to cover up something, or like what we did here is work with it by putting lattice on one side and growing vines up it.
A mural of pink roses conceals the metal door of the elevator shaft. But that's not the only thing hidden in this garden.
Well, the way this terrace also works, the big spot is right here, the big open space. It has great views, but then there's also little secret passages that go back into a kind of a secret garden over there. It's a shade garden.
Smaller private areas are tucked away throughout Frederik's rooftop garden, and each one is an intimate personal space, constantly changing.
Every day it's different. The sunset's different every day. But just to have something green to look out there, it makes me feel very much alive.
Our next rooftop garden hovers high above Manhattan's Fifth Avenue and stylishly balances big city life with nature.
The thing that attracted me to this apartment 22 years ago was that it was advertised as having more outdoor space than indoor space, and I said, yep, that's for me, because I live in my garden.
This 800-square-foot, 20th-floor rooftop gave author Abby Zabar plenty of room to create a garden that connects with its breathtaking view of Central Park.
I think I have, you know, the best lawn in the whole world. Because the parapet wall is high, I've created an internal garden, and I've created like a little walled garden, and you actually don't see the view until you go over to the parapet wall.
European hornbeams help Abby shield herself from some of the city.
I got them because behind them is a view that I'm not happy with, and it's of some water towers, and I decided to grow these in a shield in a way so that they would block that out but be attractive.
Green is the predominant color in this garden. Hardy evergreens and shrubs, like these yews, provide Abby with year-round color and can weather harsh New York winters.
I also like evergreens because they give a structure to my garden. And I'm living in a structure city, and the city is composed of buildings that have great architecture to them. I always felt that there was a place for green architecture within a stone architectural city.
With her garden, Abby can pick and choose elements of the city she likes best, such as these salvaged architectural fragments. These cobblestones have been hollowed out as planters for her alpine collection, which includes saxifraga and hens and chicks. These plants can handle extreme conditions, such as the powerful winds that race unblocked through Central Park and slam into the west side of the garden.
I actually have to weight things down with stone, which is okay because I like the stone, but it was something that I came up with.
Despite the difficulties of rooftop gardening, more New Yorkers than ever are challenging and enhancing their urban environment. Abby herself has noticed an increase in the amount of rooftop green space she can see from her garden.
I think the view around me has become greener because although these terraces and balconies have always been here, I can see it before my eyes that people are using their terraces more. They're just, every year there's more greenery.
Abby has certainly contributed to the green skyline of New York with her hidden rooftop. She's enjoyed this private getaway for 2 decades and expects it to remain her garden sanctuary for many years to come. When we return, World Garden Tour visits an enchanting sculpture garden etched into a rugged Swedish hillside.
Sunday morning.
Our World Garden Tour now travels to MILLESGÅRDEN, located on the island of LIDINGO, roughly 15 minutes from the center of Stockholm, Sweden. Once a private family garden owned by the renowned Swedish sculptor Carl Milles, MILLESGÅRDEN has grown to become an exhibition center, a popular tourist attraction, and a source of pride for the Swedish people. Carl Milles, born June 23, 1875, was a self-taught sculptor who gained worldwide recognition for his whimsical and daring works, which often included figures from Greek mythology, as well as astrological and water themes. In 1908, Milles bought a rugged piece of land to create a studio.
Milles became acquainted with this piece of property by his founder, the man who casts his sculptures in bronze, who gave him a tip that there was a wonderful piece of property outside of the city of Stockholm, but not that far. It was a very difficult piece of topography because it was just a stone cliff going down into the harbor here. But Milles had this idea in the back of his mind that he was someday going to make a sculpture garden here on terraces. This piece of property, being the space of a cliff, really is, by its very nature, vertical. And in order to turn it into a garden, in order to make the stone face a green garden, he had to make half-circle form terraces, fill them with earth, and plant them with something. And what he wanted was to get the effect of the cypresses that grow throughout the Mediterranean, but they're not hardy in Sweden. So what he did is got the next best thing. These are all junipers, which grow wild in this area here, because he was very influenced by the impressions of the wonderful gardens that he saw growing in Italy. And that was his original inspiration, and in fact, that's what he ultimately did. He made a sort of Mediterranean garden in the north.
Sweden's cold climate severely limits the types of plants that can be incorporated into the garden. The emphasis is on hardy evergreens like juniper trees and shrubs like rhododendron, along with birch trees and boxwood. Other bedded and potted plants like Indian crest and water lilies blooming alongside other flowers add color in the brief summer. The terrace greenery provides a backdrop against which Milles' wonderful sculptures are displayed. The terraces themselves took 50 years to complete. This upper terrace was planted in 1909, a year after the main building was built. The middle terrace provides a commanding view of the lower terraces from its long granite colonnade. The Little Austria terrace was built in 1924 to emulate the Austrian home of Karl's wife, Olga. It has two chapels, the larger of which serves as Karl's and Olga's final resting place. Below Little Austria is Olga's terrace, which boasts a delightful fountain. 4 large staircases descend to the lower terrace, completed in the early 1950s, when Milles returned to Sweden at the age of 75. And thrusting skyward throughout the garden are massive stone columns, architectural remnants of places lost in time, such as the old Stockholm Opera House and the Hotel Rydberg. Milles' collection of sculpture is also here, valiantly challenging the sky.
Most of the sculptures on the tall columns here are facing upwards, and many of the columns are quite tall. They're between 6 and 10 meters tall. The reason being that this little island is just outside Stockholm. Originally, there was no bridge connecting us to. At the time that Milles was here, there was no bridge just nearby us here, and none of the construction in the background existed at all. There were none of the apartments. It was just a forest on the other side, so there was a natural panorama for his works. But when he returned in old age to Sweden, in the meantime, Stockholm had grown out, and there was a completely different panorama in the background, and to get a natural setting, he put them on very tall columns, which accents their innate verticality. You've probably noticed that most of these works on the tallest columns are really designed to be seen in silhouette. And as an additional character, they have the appearance of being on their way up to the heavens, away from their columns. They're just momentarily resting there.
Carl Milles' brother Everett, who designed the main house, was an architect, as were many of Carl's friends, including Frank Lloyd Wright.
Milles' works in the 50s are very influenced by Wright's cantilever principle. If you look at Milles' God's hand leaning out over its column, or Pegasus flying away, just supported, you know, on a wing, the tip of a wing, it's exactly the same architectural principle in sculpture.
When World Garden Tour returns, we'll share some simple ideas for adding neoclassical touches to your own garden, just like they've done here at MILLESGÅRDEN.
Hips. You love them?
Past glories come alive as our World Garden Tour returns to the famous MILLESGÅRDEN in Sweden.
A very important element in the garden is the use of architectural fragments, which gives it a particular character of verticality. He uses columns in a way that, in fact, that many engineers object to, because they're columns that are freestanding and not actually supporting anything. But it gives the garden a character of being a ruin, in other words, something left from an earlier time. And it's exactly that illusionistic element that he was seeking. We have visitors that find something here which they probably think is typically Swedish, but it isn't at all. It's a kind of fantasy combination of the North and the Mediterranean and our time and earlier times, and antiquity and the Renaissance. And it's that sort of complementary interplay between different cultures and different times that really fills it full of fantasy and makes it such a very special experience to be here.
Neoclassical touches are found throughout the spectacular MILLESGÅRDEN, offering ideas for incorporating a glimpse of the past to your own garden. Capture a feeling of antiquity with carefully placed architectural fragments. These can be found at many garden and statuary stores and at architectural salvage yards. Statuary stores also often carry small statues, urns, and other classical pieces. Try incorporating these pieces into a fountain for a delightful mix of sight and sound. For a more ambitious garden, direct a visitor's attention skyward with stairways, or on a single-level garden, achieve the same rising effect with unsupported columns and vertically shaped trees. And be sure to select plants appropriate to your climate that will guide a visitor's eyes to points of interest that combine the ancient with the modern. From the soaring delights of MILLESGÅRDEN in Sweden, to the dizzying heights of New York City's rooftop gardens, to the intimate wonders of the romantic garden in Spain, we thank you for traveling with us, and we hope you'll join us again next time on World Garden Tour.